All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to our March 1st Affordable Housing Committee meeting. Commissioner Amanda Edwards will be joining the meeting, is expected to join the meeting in a few moments, probably via Zoom at first, and then she'll be joining the meeting in person. She had another public commitment to attend to that she'll be traveling from. The items we have on our agenda for today are approval of our February 1st and 15 minutes, and then we're going to, under new business, get an overview of our Affordable Housing Services Program applications, and then also have some follow-up discussion about our recommended goals related to homelessness, and then also have a discussion around revisiting a county-developed proposal during the ARPA process around potential acquisition of property for affordable housing. So I think the first item we need to do is to take care of is approval of the February 1st and 15th minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve both the February 1 and 15th minutes.
And how do you vote on that motion?
Aye.
I also vote aye.
Gets me every time.
Never gets old. All right. So we now come to new business, and the first item I think we're gonna take up is our, Matt's gonna walk us through our process for reviewing our Affordable Housing Services Program applications.
All right. So as a reminder for the committee and for those who aren't aware of the process fully, the Affordable Housing Services Program applications were due on the 11th of February at the close of business on that date. We did receive 12 total complete applications, though some were missing some documents, and we'll touch a little bit on that. At that point, staff begins the process of pulling down all of the application documents and compiling those, as well as starts its review from an administrative perspective of the various aspects of the application in order to provide this committee with a summary report. We are still in process of preparing a summary report for each application, but we wanted to provide an overview of kind of what we've seen in the projects that we've received thus far, to give you a primer on the applications that we've received. Additionally, this year, which is different perhaps than past cycles, we are, though they are large applications in some cases, providing printed copies to each of the committee members so that you can fully and in-depth review the entire packet for each applicant. Those are in process and should be to you either later today or tomorrow, so that you have those as a reference point to begin your kind of independent analysis of the various projects. And we will also be making a copy available at the planning department. So if anyone wants to come and view the applications, we'll have that readily available for anyone who would like to see that. We'll also be moving to a platform, hopefully, where they can do that electronically as well, so that we're being transparent about all the applications that we receive. As I mentioned, we did receive 12 different applications. We received 5 new construction for multifamily residential development constructions for rent. 2 applications for down payment assistance were requested. 3 applications for emergency repair grants, and then 2 new start applications. The total requests exceeded $9 million, and those are intended to support total project costs totaling over $140 million. The impact cumulatively to households and units, if all were funded fully, would be around 781 units or households, depending on which particular program that we are, or that the funding was requesting support for. The first group, and we put these in order, I'll go back just a little bit, in order of priority listed in the program guidelines, which fairly closely aligned to the recent discussion of your goals and strategies to kind of move that forward. So we will look at the multifamily requests first, followed by down payment assistance, which supports single family development, emergency repair, and then the new start request. So the first request that we received is from Commonwealth Development Corporation of America for the Fairhaven Summit construction project. This is a loan request in the amount of $1.25 million to support a 77-unit project. The request per unit comes within the parameters of what is permitted within the program. It would allow for a leverage of, for each dollar requested, pulling in an additional $14.23. The target in this case is below 80% AMI, but does include units at 60%, 50%, and 30% AMI. So there's a variety of thresholds, and that detail will be provided with our summary report to you when that is finalized. The average cost per unit is $247,000, and these are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. So there's also a mix of bedrooms within the project. What's not shown on this slide, and I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit more about the project. It is a 9% housing tax credit. They have received the award already, so that is a committed $9.9 million in equity. They also have an identified lender for their permanent loan. This recipient has received a $400,000 Asheville Regional Housing Consortium home grant loan as well, and have proposed a deferred developer fee in order to make this project feasible.
Did you say it was a home grant or loan?
It's a home loan, I'm sorry. So that is a repayable loan with soft financing, similar to our principal balloon deferred interest payment structure.
And where's it located?
Fairhaven Summit is in the city limits of Asheville. I don't have the exact address with me, but all of the site-specific maps and addresses will be provided with the full packet to you.
To a meeting.
Amanda is joined.
Okay, great. And the tax credit award has been made by the state.
Yes.
Housing Finance.
The other thing about this project, it is within the city, but the city itself has not provided any funding support for this project. So it's possible that funding could be requested through them. And at the staff level, we've alerted them that they are seeking some additional funding support. And they may be seeking that from the city as well, depending on how.
Above and beyond what they're asking for.
This is the gap that we're aware of that Fairhaven Summit has requested. So it's the potential that if it wasn't fully funded by the county, that there could be some funding support through the city.
Okay. From what we understand so far, they're saying this is what they see as the gap.
Yes. And there are specifics, I will say, in each of these cases that they are requesting in terms of loan terms. But again, it's a deeper conversation, and we'll detail that more in the staff report when it's finalized for you. The second project, which is brought to us by LDG Multifamily LLC, is known as the Monticello Family Construction Loan. It's for property located off of Monticello Road, so outside of the town of Weaverville's jurisdiction. Currently, they have indicated an intention to request annexation as part of this project. So it's currently outside of Weaverville, but will be part of the town of Weaverville at some point, according to the application. This is a 4% low-income housing tax credit project. They are seeking support for 168 units. The request is just under $9,000 per unit in the form of a $1.5 million loan. This is a high leverage ratio in this case. For each dollar that's requested, they're proposing to bring in an additional external $27.43. Again, the target here is less than 80% AMI. There will be some units at that level, but there are also units which will be prescribed at the 60% and 30% AMI level within that project. The average cost per unit is just over $250,000, and it would include a mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. This project, while it is a 4% low-income housing tax credit project, has not yet been awarded, so they're going to be seeking that award in this cycle. So there should be information about that in August. The capital that they're proposing includes both the tax credits, a construction to permanent loan, as well as a $1.2 million deferred developer fee, which represents about 48% of that developer fee.
Could you say that one more time, please?
About the developer fee?
Yeah, how much is
It's a
deferred?
$1.2 million deferred fee, which is about 48% of their total fee.
You said 40 or 48%?
48. There isn't an existing commitment from the county. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to access any funding from the city. They're located outside of the city's jurisdiction. And there are no other local funds that have been identified as through Dogwood Health or other traditionally local sources.
I happened to be at a meeting with the mayor of Weaverville and the town manager of Weaverville about unrelated issues. And they did mention, I think they have spoken with the town of Weaverville, but he didn't mention that they had solicited any support. And I don't know that the town of Weaverville has like any funds set aside for investments in housing, but they did seem to be aware of it and had a favorable view.
We do know the caveat about this one, and again, we'll get into those kind of details more fully as we move through the projects and provide you with the staff summary report. They are not slated to begin construction within our specified timeframe or to make that initial draw, partly because of putting together that financing based on the August timeframe and their purchase agreements and the type of loan structure they're proposing. So there would need to be an exception, at the committee level for allowing funding of this project, given that it won't break ground or draw funds kind of in the prescribed timeframe. And as a reminder, those timeframes are there in order that you're not committing funds that then are not moving effectively. So that would be part of that discussion on this project.
And Matt, based on what we understand at this point, is the developer expressing that this is the funds they're requesting from the county is the anticipated gap funding needed for the project, or are there any other, funds needed?
That is what we understand the gap to be. They've shown a complete source of budgeted revenues. A lot of their proposal includes a significant permanent loan amount, about $23 million if that is a permanent loan. We did not receive a full pro forma, so that is part of why we're not able to complete our staff summary report. So we're going to be requesting a full and more detailed pro forma to better analyze the overall project and understand those revenues and that structure.
Yeah. Something we want to list.
Right.
Then we have Mountain Housing Opportunities. This is a request for what they're referring to as phase one of a Deaver View redevelopment project. The request is a $1.2 million loan to support 82 new units to be constructed. So if you're familiar with the Deaver View existing site, the proposal here is to actually build new units on vacant portions of the property. So it doesn't engage or involve the existing structures that are on that site. So these will be 82 new units. This proposal is funded with 9% low-income housing tax credit projects that they will be requesting, is our understanding. We don't believe they have that as an award at this time, but we'll verify the status of all of their revenue sources as we move forward. The request is just under $15,000 per unit in loan. It would create a leverage ratio of about 12.71 additional dollars outside of the dollar invested by the county. I will say, and I don't have those specifics in front of me, there are a number of other local funding sources in this one. So it's not necessarily pulling a great deal of external revenue, but we'll provide you the details about what all of those various revenue sources are. In this case, I believe that there's some housing authority funding, a loan portion. There's a city grant through the housing authority that they're accessing as well for this particular project. But again, we can provide all those details in our staff summary report and as we move the project forward.
And this is expected to be a 9%
Yes.
tax credit project.
Yes.
But still yet to compete for that award.
Right. I anticipate based on their schedule that they are making that application and would know, in August about the success of that particular application. Again, the AMI target here is less than 80%, so it's compliant. They are proposing units at 60% and below, 50% and below, and 30% and below, as well as a mixture of 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. The average cost per unit in this case is just over $200,000. There aren't site acquisition costs in this case because the property is already held, so that's part of why they're achieving that kind of lower estimated cost for this particular project. Again, they've requested varying terms from what's offered in the program guidance, but we will review those in detail as we move the project forward through the process. Right, and we have a second application from Mountain Housing Opportunities. This application is a project that you're very familiar with at this point. It came through our cycle last year. It's the Lakeshore Villas construction loan project, or construction loan request for the Lakeshore Villas project. As you're aware, the county has already provided funding in the form of a grant through the recovery funding ARPA process. So this is a request in addition to that already awarded funding. It is a $1.2 million request, totaling $10,000 per unit. The average cost at this point with the new pro forma we've been provided is just over $200,000 at $204,418. And these again have a unit mix at 60% AMI and 40% AMI as well. So again, this is a project that you're familiar with at this point. And then the final request in this category is again a project that you're familiar with, but procedurally we thought at the staff level and encourage this applicant to request funding through this cycle. So the Volunteers of America have an existing FY22 Affordable Housing Services Program award in the amount of $800,000 to support this same project. But procedurally, under that program guidance, we had a little less flexibility in loan terms and other categories, which the committee, as a result of that process, revised in the 23 cycle. And so we encouraged Volunteers of America to submit a new application such that in the event that they aren't able to move to construction and their existing allocation and award would be re-available, that we could allocate it through the 23 process. So essentially, if you continue to desire to support that project, it gives you the capacity to do it under this program guidance. It makes it a little easier to complete their contractual obligations, if that makes sense.
But all the metrics, the amount, everything's the same. There's no change on their end in terms of.
So we would detail for you their updated pro forma. Every day that a project is there, you have a new set of financials. So we would want to be transparent and detail that, but the request level is the same. They faced some difficulties through the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency because this is a partial rehab and a new construction project and how to structure that financing. And that's what's actually created the delays. So they're a little concerned they won't be able to make their first draw by the end of July as is prescribed. So out of an abundance of caution, we just said, go ahead and make an application so that we have a couple of avenues if the committee is interested in continuing to support this project, for that project to be supported.
And the expectation is this is a 4% project that they'll work those issues out with an eye towards getting that approved by August. Is that the same August cycle that we're?
So they do actually anticipate that everything will be in line by May, but they're concerned that they won't actually be able to physically break ground, which is how they can begin making a draw with us in July. So it's just behind kind of the curve is what they're anticipating. But again, wanted to provide them and the committee with options as to how to address that request. So that is the summary of probably your most significant asks, and we went through them quickly. There is a lot of detail when it comes to these projects. Staff is working to develop some tables that show you comparisons of a number of aspects of the projects to help clarify and identify the differences and similarities and how that might impact some of the goals that the committee has been working towards. Those again are the most complex for us to review and to report out to you, and also to be transparent and communicating exactly how they're structured and how they differ. But we will continue to work through that in the next couple of meetings in order to assist in arriving at recommendations on those projects. The next category was down payment assistance loan requests. We have 2 requests this year. The first is from Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity. And these are what they're requesting is a construction to down payment assistance loan. So in that structure, they will request funding at the time they construct infrastructure and other improvements, and then those would transfer to the individual property owners as those homes are sold and transferred to those owners. So they would be assumed at that point by the homeowner as down payment assistance. The request is a loan in the amount of $1.978 million to support 46 homes to be constructed at an average of $43,000 per unit. This request does exceed the cap of what's allowed based on the per unit cost. So that would be an exception to consider and discuss in terms of if there's a desire to allocate the funds.
The cap is 36 or 46?
I'm sorry?
The cap is the cap is 36 or
The cap for down payment assistance is 10% of the cost per unit. And so in this project proposal, that would be roughly $27,941 to $42, somewhere in that category. So it exceeds that amount by about $16,000 per unit. Again, that would create a gap that our understanding at this initial kind of stage would have to be filled some other way, if the funding weren't available through this particular meeting. So we would need to get a better understanding of how that impacts the project overall. But these are 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. And I know that this committee, as members of the board, are aware of the other ARPA funding award for this project. So those are the 14 other units which are part of this phase. So it's a 60-unit phase. 14 of the units, they requested infrastructure funding support through ARPA. And this is the balance of those units that would be requesting funding support. And then we have, for the first time, the county has.
Hey, I have one question on this, and this is, I don't know we'll get all the details, but just a couple of high things. So this is a down payment assistance loan. So is this one of those that would be recycled back to the county pretty quickly, or kind of stay embedded in the project?
Typically, they stay embedded in the project for the long-term period. And the way that those work, and this is probably a good discussion to have, this is a reminder of how these are funded. Again, upfront construction funding at the time the unit is sold, the habitat basically allows the property owner to assume the debt as a lien on the property that we then hold the deed of trust and note on. And so if at any point in the future that property owner sells that home to a non-income qualified person, and the other case is Habitat refuses to repurchase it. So they have the right of first refusal. So they can purchase it and assume that down payment assistance and move it to the next person. But if they choose to sell at market rate, that's the point in time that we would receive repayment. So they're not frequent. It's maybe 1 or 2 in a year on average that the county receives repayment on for down payment assistance programs. So. The next request, so this is the first time we've seen an application of this type from this applicant, but it's the land trust, Asheville Buncombe Land Trust. They are seeking down payment assistance loan. They're hoping to utilize this funding to impact 4 homes. And the request is $30,000 per unit in down payment assistance. Their structure is a little different, so we will have to do a deeper dive in terms of understanding the nuances of how their program works and explaining that as well. But basically, these are considered to be permanently affordable units, so they're going to be transferring between from owner to owner over the course of the life of the single-family unit and ownership. And so while these will be down payment assistance loans, it is very unlikely that the funding would ever return, but it's because of the restrictions and other categories they put on the project. This was kind of the avenue. They did seek participation in our application processes. They attended meetings and asked what's a path forward for us in terms of getting this kind of funding support. And staff identified down payment assistance loan as kind of the viable option for them in the existing program. So while it would be a loan and our terms would make it repayable, deed restrictions and other factors likely would mean that is never going to return to us. But it would be an investment in a permanently affordable unit going forward. Again, this one's a little unique. We're very accustomed to the Habitat and MHO model where they already have a house plan and they know what they're building and where. Here, these would be potentially new construction or rehab of existing sites that they purchased. So we have a little less clarity on exactly what that would look like. So we'll have to provide some guidance and some potential avenues and paths forward in terms of allocating this funding, given our caveats of more than 10% of a project cost and that sort of thing. So
it may be new construction, or they may just go buy a house.
Right. So they could purchase a home without any improvements. They could purchase a home and do upgrades and rehabilitation on the home. But basically, it would be a willingness to participate in up to 10% of that cost, whatever that cost is. Whether they build it, they buy one and resell it, or they purchase one and rehab that unit. But it would be up to 10% of that cost committed as down payment assistance. And it helps to reduce, in that particular model, you're basically getting market rate or providing market rate units at a significantly reduced price. And this helps bring that price down to where they can get a secure lien or mortgage on the property. So again, a different model. So we'll have to think about exactly how to assist in allocating that and monitoring it and ensuring that we follow our program guidelines. But we're already working with them to try to determine how we might be able to move forward on that one.
And Matt, we supported local interest for the first time ever in last cycle. Is that right?
Yes. So that was the new start request for a position support in order for them to identify basically a project oversight type of function, acquiring, rehabbing, constructing. So
they're new or brand or relatively new. Just off the top of your head, do you have a sense of how else they get funding for these types of programs?
So they did provide.
Who else they're asking?
They did provide a detailed budget. So they have funding from the city currently. They have a home award as well, and that is all playing in along with this funding in order to support a number of units. Again, either purchased, built, or rehabbed. So it's an interesting model. I believe their first 2 units are slated to kind of transition into ownership this spring. So again, they're a new organization. They're getting their footing. And they do have committed funds, so we'll detail that for.
Is it your understanding that the 30,000 per unit, is that all they need to get those units done, so the other funding that they're hoping to get, does it do more units, or do they need more funding than 30,000 per unit just to do 4 units?
In their project, they're proposing that our funding would support 4 units. And they're utilizing that funding along with the city's funding and potentially the home grant together in order to produce as many units as possible. But ours would only be associated with 4 particular units at that point.
And you don't think they need more money to do those 4 units? Like our money would get 4 units done by itself?
So I think they are going to be utilizing some of their other funding commitments. I don't know exactly what that structure would be. You know, if they're selling a $200,000 unit and the home buyer can only afford $100,000, then their gap is $100,000, right? So, you know, up to, at that case, if we're capping at 10%, 20,000 of that can be covered with these funds. And then they're going to use their other grant and funding sources for that other piece of the gap. So again, it's a new model and we have to work out the details in contracting with them. But they did, you know, make a request that they felt would be sufficient to deliver 4 units. So those are the 2 down payment assistance requests. The next grouping we have are 3 emergency repair grant requests. So these are ones that you're going to be familiar with as well. The first is for Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity. They've requested $470,470 to support 77 households at an average investment at $6,110 per household. They are leveraging other funds in this case within their budget to deliver those units. The target AMI for their emergency repair program is less than 70% AMI. And they are not, in this case, requesting any funding for admin. So these would be the actual project delivery costs in terms of the repairs themselves. The second request is from Collaborativa La Milpa for emergency repair grant. The request is for $213,675. This project should seem somewhat familiar. If you will recall, SEMA, and they use a couple of different names, but Collaborativa La Milpa, SEMA, received New Start funding in the FY21 cycle to provide emergency repairs in the Sourwood Mobile Home Park. And that amounted to about $1,000 per unit in repair total that they were able to achieve. This project is a little different than maybe we've seen before, because here in the New Start category, they were basically trying to understand how to deliver an emergency repair program and to build that organizational capacity. And here they're saying, now we understand how to do this program. We've built the organizational capacity. And they are requesting additional funds to support additional emergency repairs on the same units. So it wouldn't be new units being impacted. It's the same units that still have repair needs. And so it would serve 21 households within that same Sourwood Mobile Home Park, is our understanding, but provide them with the additional repairs that remained outstanding.
What's the name of the park again?
Sourwood.
Where is that?
It's the Potter Emma community.
Okay.
That area.
Yep.
Okay.
So it was also referred to as Potter Emma. We
Right,
have
right.
a lot of different categories for naming this project.
You took me on a tour of that last summer. Okay.
Right. So, like I said, again, in the New Start, there was a limited amount of funding. It was to assist them in kind of getting a program off the ground to understand how it works. And here they're coming back to say, we need substantially additional repairs on these projects. We did some really emergent things. We would like to continue to make improvements on this project in this site.
And Matt, based on your review of the proposal, how do they do the repair work? Just, I know Habitat has got kind of a model, Image's got a model, contracting out, but what's the short version of sort of how they carry out?
So they have internal staffing. It's similar to MHO in their model. So they have some internal staffing that's assessing the need, that's working in kind of like what the contract scopes will be. And then they engage with a third party to do some of the repairs. So there's a little bit of internal and then some contracting as well. So their model isn't like a wholly in-house supported program. And then the last request, which is, again, one that you're familiar with, is Mountain Housing Opportunities Emergency Repair Program. They're requesting $300,000 to serve 33 households. The request is just over $9,000 per unit on average. They target a lower AMI than Habitat in this particular case at less than or equal to 50% AMI. And they do include some administrative costs in their request as well, which is allowed and permitted in the program, but they just have a different means of structuring their overall program so that they do charge admin within this category. Those are the 3 emergency repair program requests. I will say that one of the considerations, and staff will highlight for you so that you're aware when you get our summary staff reports, is where they are in their existing awards in terms of expenditures. So if you recall, we provided the update that they both Habitat and MHO have just closed their 2021 program awards. So they're just beginning to draw down the 22 program awards kind of at mid-year, mid-fiscal year. So there might be a consideration in terms of what's that existing balance, how many units do you anticipate being able to deliver, as well as what the wait list looks like in terms of assessing how much staff may recommend or the committee may want to consider allocating in this cycle to this type of project and program. And then finally, the New Start grant requests. There are 2. The first is from the Housing Authority of the City of Asheville. This is the Housing Choice Voucher Landlord Incentive Project. They are requesting $25,000 in a New Start grant to support 25 households at about $1,000 per household. This would be, they're not bringing in any additional funding in this particular project, but the idea here is to incentivize the landlord through the means with which the Housing Authority is able. So there are certain things that they can't do because they provide vouchers, but compliantly provide the landlords with a financial incentive to expand units available that accept vouchers. So this would target households at less than or equal to 50% AMI because those are voucher recipient level income households. And again, the goal being to engage 25 additional units and households through that New Start program.
And is the incentive, we will give you $1,000?
I mean, basically, there's a little bit more detail to it, but it's to incentivize landlords, and this is partly from their application, for their initial lease up with voucher holders, as well as for their commitment of additional units leased up to voucher households. So it could be for existing landlords to expand the number of units. It can also be for new landlords to become engaged in the program. But it is, the landlord would be receiving a cash incentive through the grant.
Does the Housing Authority have any geographic parameters or boundaries beyond the city limits of Asheville? I mean, does it operate
So
outside of the limits, I guess, is my.
on the voucher program, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's
So
fine.
you can utilize vouchers within the county as well. They do have landlord incentive activities that they have been pursuing. You're familiar with the Thrive kind of model. But again, all of that has been through city funding, so they can only really engage landlords within the city limits. And the goal here would be to engage landlords in the county because they have a lot of requests and desire for people to be able to remain in their communities in the county that need the voucher assistance. So this would be targeted, not exclude their engaging landlords within the city, but I think their anticipation is to try to push that funding into the county's area because those are a market that they haven't really been able to tap through a New Start.
Just from kind of what I've heard, I think Thrive considered submitting an application for New Start, but ultimately decided not to for a number of reasons. But I think the main one was that I think they felt they needed more than is capped on the program. So I think their intent is to send the county and park a proposal to look at for expanding their voucher work also Florida County by level. So that may be something we see in the coming harvest cycle.
Yeah, and I don't want to confuse, I mean, these are completely different organizations. They would be completely different programs that they operate. And the Housing Authority is using internal staff that are already involved in landlord engagement. So that's why there's no additional admin cost there. It's just allowing them a capacity to further incentivize landlords that perhaps they haven't been able to provide any kind of cash incentive to participate. And again, I'm boiling these down to really bare bones. You'll get the full application. We'll get a summary report. And then the final request was from Black Mountain Swananoa Chamber of Commerce for, as a new start for an affordable housing motor court rehab. The applicant, I understand, may not have been aware of the opportunity to make application until the day that they were due. So we did not receive any attachments. So it's very difficult for us to assess this project for you, even in a summary way. But at bare bones level, what we kind of understand is it's a project that would cost around $4 million to deliver. It's to purchase 2 existing motor courts out in that community, and then to rehab them and repair them and put them back out for rent. My basic understanding. I'm again being honest that without all those details, it's really hard for us to assess it. So one thing that might be helpful from staff's perspective is to get, I guess, feedback from the committee as to whether you would like for us, given kind of the constraints of our time frame, to ask them, can you get these attachments to us to allow us to assess the project, or if, given that they didn't provide any of the required attachments, if you don't want us to move forward at this point. So that would be feedback that would be helpful for us in terms of responding to their application.
Well, it's also not really a new start project, right? I mean, it sounds like a big, kind of, significant, expensive project, not a new start type project.
And the narrative, I mean, the application, itself was complete enough that the narrative kind of explained what it is, but again, without seeing the total project budget, it's difficult for us to kind of understand how you're spending it or how this is allowing you to move forward in a kind of traditional way. This is a new applicant. This is not an arena where we've understand that they've worked before. So you could look at it a number of different ways, but again, our ability to assess it was kind of limited without, because typically we start our analysis with what is the budget, what are your revenues, what are your expenditures, and that level of detail wasn't really available for us to assess it. And this one, I think, was a timing issue, just about when our cycle closed and when they were aware of the potential for funding.
Is it your understanding, best guess, that these attachments and data exists, that just didn't give it to us in time, or
I would
create it out of?
So we specify, a particular budget form. You need to show in the new start what's admin, what's actual cost of project delivery. So there are a few things that are standard forms. I would imagine that they have, whatever their articles of incorporation, their bylaw, all of those documents, I believe, would exist. But also, I'm not familiar if they've ever used our portal for an application either. I don't believe that they have. So it may have been a lack of familiarity with how to provide those documents as well. So like I said, it's hard for us to say, other than I do think it was a time constrained submittal.
I think, and I'll be happy to forward this to you. I think literally this morning, actually, I think Amanda and I got an email from someone in Black Mountain talking about this project, and basically says that this is hotel conversion for 25 units. The total project cost is like around $4.7 million. So I'll forward that to Parker and to staff. I mean, there's definitely not $25,000. That's just the
The
conversation.
reference, I'm trying to remember all the details, and we've looked at a lot of applications, but I do remember something about a reference for seed funding to get like the project rolling. Again, it was just not super clear.
Yeah, I think they're unfamiliar with the process too, and so they probably didn't know exactly what to do. So, sure.
All right. You know, I would say just kind of off the cuff from a sort of process standpoint, I mean, I think, you know, we do kind of want to treat everyone fairly, right? And sometimes, you know, of course, we have follow-up questions and information we seek, but this does feel like a, you know, a completely incomplete application. So I guess sort of just from a fairness of treating, if other developers were doing this, would we say that that's an okay enough level of information to send in? I'd say probably not. But I would also say, you know, I mean, the commission's very interested in housing issues through the ARPA process. So, you know, if they're interested in engaging with the county, there is another opportunity out there that they would have time over the next couple of months to maybe get a little bit more prepared for. Just something off the cuff thoughts about it.
And one potential path forward, you know, depending on whether you feel comfortable with funding them based on their initial submittal, but we could request additional information so that we can get more familiar with the project. You know, if they want to provide the attachments, if they want to, for us to provide an analysis and kind of feedback. I mean, I think that's been helpful to other applicants in the past that haven't been successful. At least they kind of understand what the takeaways were from staff level. And it may help better prepare them for other funding cycles that are coming up. So we're happy if that makes sense to the committee to ask them for it and say your project may not advance given the incomplete nature of your initial submittal. But if you would like, we can continue to evaluate it through the process. That seems to make sense.
Yeah, I think so. We want, you know, we want to encourage new groups to get in this game when they have one-off opportunities like this.
And we'll mention the ARPA process.
Yeah.
That as well.
For sake of sounding like a stickler on deadlines, I mean, part of why we have this process now is to get everyone in, you know, the same time frame of the award. So it puts us in somewhat of the situation we were in prior to this really well done process of people coming in at awkward times in the year. So I think we want to keep, everyone knowing what that time frame is, when things are due. But I think being able to provide them with some additional information and analysis is a great idea.
Yeah, and obviously it's like a local municipal partner of the counties too, so we can also all kind of, you know, respond to the emails and stuff that we've gotten and kind of start, you know, learning more about it and getting feedback. That sounds good. All right.
So just again, here's that summary slide. You'll be seeing this a lot. Everything that's requested, as well as how that would leverage or result in total project delivery funding. So
This is less than last year, right?
the request,
Top line number is smaller than last year's.
Maybe so.
That's $9 million.
I think we were at 8.
Okay.
I want to say around 8 million. So it's fairly close. Again, the $800,000, depending on how you want to proceed with that, that's already allocated from existing funds. So that's not necessarily an additional ask. So that brings it down to about $8.2 million in what I would consider to be new, wholly new requests. So the
If we kept their original 800,000, would they build that many more units if we gave them another 800,000?
I think that the site might be constrained, and also their NCHFA funding. They've finally gotten that, from what I understand, that loan term worked out. So they probably aren't going to want to go right back to the table and
They've got a bunch of additional land back there. Tell them just put 80 more on the back of it.
So as I said, all these projects are nuanced, and we will try to do our best to explain the differences, highlight the similarities as we move them all forward in the next few meetings in order to assist the committee in determining its desired allocation. This number does exceed the regular amount of funding that has been allocated to the program. I know there's some discussion about increasing potentially the budget request, but this number also exceeds that amount, which has been discussed during other meetings. So as always, we have more asks than we anticipate funding for, but staff will also bring back to you kind of the balance of unallocated funds. So we do have some of that, and provide you an update on program income that we have received to date that's available as well. So outside of your regular budget request, there may be some funding that you could reallocate to support these projects too.
I have one other process question. So it's my understanding that Buncombe County got like a special designation of some sort, maybe by the State Housing Finance Agency, in which it may be possible for our county to get 2 9% LIHTC awards to Buncombe County this year. I think it was related to the flooding, like, the natural disaster that occurred as a result of that. So there was some lobbying by various organizations. I think Esther and I signed a letter that folks asked us to sign asking for this. The Home Consortium did and stuff like that. That they did, it didn't, I don't think it guarantees it, but I think they kind of created more of like an opening for that. So is that, do y'all know where that stands? Is that correct, what I just said?
I'm not certain of the status. I feel like I've seen something which suggests that that may have been successful, that we might have an additional award. In the request that we received, we have an existing 9% award and then an existing 4% award. I'm looking at them and thinking about them in summary. So there's, yeah, everything that we have either has existing funding or is 4%. So the decisions here, I don't believe would be necessarily impactful outside of the D review project. That one is a new 9% request. So that one may or may not be funded. There may be an additional project, but we don't have competing projects running in the same cycle, both asking for 9%. So that decision wouldn't necessarily impact.
At least those that have applied to the county, right? There could be others out there that we don't know about yet.
Yes.
That might end up competing, might ultimately end up competing, but we just don't know yet.
Right.
But right now on our list, Fairhaven's already gotten its award, and D Review Redevelopment Phase 1 is pursuing an award in this cycle.
Correct.
Okay.
And for that kind of perspective in history, Fairhaven Summit was the 9% tax credit award when Lakeshore Villas was seeking the 9% award and didn't receive it. So,
Lakeshore.
well, we will, as I said, we're in the process of printing all the applications out so that you have full access to all the materials that we've received. We are requesting detailed pro formas from every applicant so that we can know and understand to the best of our ability their revenues, their expenditures, and their projected cash flow over the life of the project. And we are working to complete our staff reports. We will, of course, engage our finance staff to review the audits and their financial statements and give us an idea of their financial health. And obviously pulling in any other staff as needed for expertise. But we hope to get those staff summary reports out to you as soon as we get all of that information back in. And we may, in fact, release some of that, particularly for the not multifamily projects, because those are the most complicated, earlier than later 2 years. So we'll be getting that out to you as soon as we can to assist in evaluation. It's a lot of information, a lot of material to get through the next few weeks. So. There are no other questions. I think that is everything we have for you today on this item.
Well, that's great. I mean, it looks like a really robust, set of projects. So look forward to digging into that.
Next.
All right.
So this is picking up on the discussion that we had at the last meeting around the homelessness goal setting, and also thinking about that in the context of presenting this kind of phase 1 of our goals to the full board on the 15th. So thinking about what we, just a minimal piece that we would want to, from staff's perspective, we want to share with the full board. We thought it might be helpful to kind of tee up the 5 kind of areas that we've identified goals, more kind of broad overarching items. So that's what this slide is. You'll see here, you know, a bullet. Number 1 is around rent. Number 2 is around home ownership. Number 3 is really around repair. We're calling it naturally occurring affordable housing, but that would encompass repair projects. The 4th one is around homelessness, and then the final one is around vouchers. So this is for you all to consider. This is a new slide with some new, not new goals, but new wording around those goals. Just thought it might be helpful when you're sharing with the full board to kind of have that high level first before we jump into those specific numbers. And then the next slide is you're all familiar with this, obviously. These are the goals with the numbers. And the 2 items that I'm hoping to get some further direction on are the ones around homelessness that you see there in red. And those are the setting some sort of goal potentially around less than 30% AMI. And also there are some interest in a goal around new shelter beds. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there again. Last time we spoke, you all had asked for additional research around the 30%. And so we did look into that further. And as we looked back since 2011, we've had about 8% of the units are contracted at 30%. So when you apply that to our rental goal of 1,500 to 1,850, right around 150, that we would kind of get, we would expect to just get if we just keep going along at the same pace. So if you wanted to emphasize that less than 30% AMI, you might want to go, you know, above that. I think Matt had shown you options for 100, 200, and 500 something at the last meeting. So just wanted to share that information with you and see if you had any additional thoughts on that 30%, less than 30% AMI goal.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry, I was going to say, do you have Matt's amazing graph from last time that has all the
We don't have that
colors
in
and the levels
slide
and the
deck.
numbers and the?
Don't have it.
I feel like I can't do this without that.
He does do some amazing
Okay.
slide work.
I'm going to switch it.
Okay.
That was our last meeting. Let's go back. I'm going to stop sharing just so that
Yeah.
no one has to watch me click through everything.
Sorry, I don't know what you did say.
And so you said it was 8% of all the previous housing units of various kinds that we've supported, about 8%.
For,
Or
it's
just
for
for
rental since 2011.
Okay, so of the rental units we supported.
And those are the contracted ones. So when we write up the contract, we say, we specify these, you know, this number of units.
Must be.
Right.
It's the number that we are guaranteed, right? So, yeah, I was talking to, conversation. But, you know, Cindy from NHS shared that, like, they were kind of doing this analysis of the income levels of their tenants. And, you know, and they provide these guarantees, right? Because they have to for all these tax credit qualifications and stuff like that. But she said, yeah, once we went back and kind of looked at it, what we found is that, like, there's actually a higher percentage of really low income tenants in our tax credit apartments, because like about over half of their, or maybe a little over half of their tenants are voucher holders. And many of them are just very low income residents, right? But including a, you know, meaningful number of below 30%. So she basically kind of observed, like, they're, you know, they are picking up more of these really lower income folks than even what's sort of the required number to satisfy the tax credit stuff in our requirements. So there may be, if 8% is the required number, it, you know, hopefully it's the reason we think it's actually a better, an even bigger number. Yeah.
And I will say, just, you know, to assist in kind of an understanding of that, we are seeing in all of our applications, you know, as an example, the Fairhaven Summit new application, again, that's a 4% project. They're proposing 20 units even within that 4% project with a 30% threshold. So again, that's not out of line with kind of an 8% range in that project, but the more deeply affordable projects with the 9% level would tend to have more units at 30% or below. So the other caveat here is, again, those were contract specifications. So over the last several cycles, we have been very specific about all the thresholds. The program only minimally requires less than 80%. So it may not have been spelled out in contracts. It doesn't mean that they weren't delivering 30% units within those.
Commissioner Slam, is this the slide you're referring to? Is this the helpful one? Or,
I was thinking of it in the homeless context of the,
oh,
that
okay,
one. There you go.
okay.
Yeah. For the moment, when we're thinking about a goal here.
And if we, whatever number we come up with here, are we gonna then say that that will become like a contracted goal? Or, because it could be one of those, like, we could say, you know, I think we're probably actually gonna do better than this. Like, and you know, maybe we say, like, we'll get 150, probably just as, even if we did nothing, but let's try 250. I mean, we could contract to require it, or we could also, as we're supporting all these new projects, just sort of say, we're gonna monitor this. Our hunch is that we are getting more, but let's look at the numbers as these projects get built and see. Because if we are getting more, then I think we can feel good. Like, all right, we are meeting more of that need out there. If the information shows like you're not getting as many as you maybe hoped you would, then maybe we want to start putting it as a requirement on some of the new developments.
Right.
I guess a little bit of my concern would be if you make it a requirement, right? Then the developers are going to say, okay, well, if you're making me do this up front, and I don't know yet exactly what's going to happen, then I'm going to require Buncombe County to, you're going to need to put more money into my project to make sure that all works. So I guess I'd like to have a goal, but maybe at first I'd like to just kind of say, this is a goal, and like, let's really try to understand this better as projects happen. And hopefully we are, through more of these tax credit projects, seeing that that's happening. If we're not getting it, then maybe we need to kind of start, we might need to make it a requirement if it's, that needs not being met through more of these developments coming online as they are.
And just another point of context, so at 1,500 rental units, at 20% of those, you know, it's 300 units. So that's kind of right in the middle, if that helps.
Which would essentially double. We're doing 150 as is, right? No changes.
Seems like
That's
a
all
good
reason.
That would be
Yeah.
16, that would be basically 16% of all the.
So if I take the lower goal, and as of the 1,500 and apply 20% at 300, I think you're looking at that. That's 370. I'm doing the math right.
Yeah, 16% of 1850 is 300 partners, almost.
Yeah.
I would be okay with that. I'd be okay with that. I would, if we were going to pursue that number. I do think that's actually a very ambitious number. Like when you start talking about you know, that percentage as like an average of all new, like just kind of regular developments. I actually think that is a very ambitious goal. I do think we're probably getting more than 8%.
Yeah.
I doubt we're getting 16%. So I would, I definitely wouldn't want to make that a contractual obligation at this point, because I think it might totally blow up the cost of these projects if we started dropping kind of this new requirement that goes above and beyond what the already like really tough light tech requirements are, and which might also be seen as kind of just sort of out of market. You know, people might just say, I'd rather go do a project somewhere else that doesn't make me do this special thing. So I guess I'm kind of open to it if it's a goal, but not a contractual requirement that we would drop in on developers, at least not until we sort of have a much more thorough understanding of kind of
Okay.
how that's playing out with these projects that we're supporting. So that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah.
Would language similar to the 1,200 units should leverage the LIHTC program? So maybe 300 units should be available to households at less than 3%, because then it's not, it's more of our desire is to get this many units, and it seems less directive. If you're using should language, maybe at whatever number. I know that the goal of average at less than or equal to 60% AMI, again, it's like benchmarking, and it doesn't seem as explicitly required with that.
Right. I mean, this is kind of a high level goal the county would have as a whole. Like if we said, hey, we want to, we do our solicitations, then people who bring in the tax credit projects would basically know, like, I need to meet the requirements of tax credit projects, right? And but they would also see that that's a goal, so if they have a good story to tell, perhaps they'll emphasize that in their information to us, but not make it. Yeah, we won't make it a mandate for them or deem them if they don't commit to it. All right, so 200. We're going with 200.
200.
All right. Go for it. And
could we not reach that number 2 as we move forward with vouchers? Would we want to connect those in some way? I just derailed everything thinking about that.
Yeah, would they overlap with the goal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something to think about. We'll have to decide today, but some people.
Would you like to make that in the form of a motion? That 200.
Yeah, for less than 30% AMI, I'd make the motion that we should reach a goal of 200 units.
Second.
all right, and before we vote on it, one other point I would want to make on this is that as we're thinking about these units, and Matt and Sybil and I had a meeting on Friday where we were sort of going over like what are achieving these goals going to cost, and I circulated an email to y'all this morning to kind of in the notes from that conversation. So, but just so the working assumption is that for these units, for the less than 30%, that this is embedded, like this is an embedded goal within our larger 1,500 to 1,850 goal. So these are not, as I was originally thinking about this, I was thinking about these units as being like shelter beds, like a separate kind of project, like a low barrier shelter or other kinds of homeless facility shelters, which we know the price per unit to build can be quite high, right? So that as it's structured here, we're actually not assuming that this number changes our per unit cost to achieve this 1,500 to 1,850 goal. Is that correct?
Kind of in the natural occurring. The caveat is, and this is part of what's not necessarily addressed by it, a permanently supportive housing development, which has wraparound services and some other costs, is also revenue generating and often available to those at less than 30% AMI. So a targeted project like that, the per unit investment may be higher than for other projects, but those where 30% is part of the mix of a variety of incomes, it wouldn't necessarily change the anticipated cost for those units. But if it's a very specific unit, like the Days Inn Homeward Bound project, with wraparound services and other things, again, it's going to get to your 30% AMI, but that's a more costly project to deliver.
Right.
Potentially.
Yeah, so I guess the reason I want to ask, because that's still kind of on mind. I mean, I think where we kind of landed is that, well, every project's different. Like basically using this like $40,000 per unit. It's kind of an average number that we apply to this big rental goal. If we come in and say, all right, now we're going to put this 200 number in, I feel comfortable doing it and keeping that average number as the average. I just want to make sure kind of that the staff also see it that way, that like that what we're deciding or what we're about to vote on doesn't change that sort of underlying assumption that 40,000 is still a reasonable number to work with to shoot for the overall goal.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You're okay with that?
No.
All right, I just want to double check, I think that we didn't add $17 million of cost
Yeah,
to our,
right.
to our
Yes.
goal.
Yeah.
No, and for example, in this particular round, and I'm thinking about it kind of, what you've seen as requests in this year, we can benchmark for you how many units, once you decide what allocation you're going to be delivering at the various levels and tell you what you landed on. This particular cycle, there was no request for funding for a 30% or less project, which may have had a higher cost per unit. So again, it's just going to be benchmarking, and just because you receive a request to fund a whole project at 30% or less doesn't mean that you are obligated to fund it because of that goal. So
Like one of the live projects in front of us has 20 units in it, and it's actually a super low cost per unit request that's in front of us. So
yeah, another of the projects, the one with 168 unit, I believe 63 of those units are at 30% AMI. So there are some that are pretty significantly
Great.
Great.
volume, but we'll get into all those specifics with those.
We're gonna be- Yeah.
All right, all in favor of the motion, Parker? We can vote, we don't have to do it one at a time anymore. I'm so,
Because we're here physically.
because we're all here.
Yeah.
All in favor? Good to go. Yeah. Say aye.
Aye.
All right. I'm going
Okay.
to Zoom.
One remaining question.
I guess this one.
There was, is there interest in shelter goal? That's something that came up. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Go back to the other
Oh, or
presentation.
is it, maybe this is more helpful.
That's what I was at,
That's-
yeah.
Okay.
That's where my head was at already
Okay.
ahead of the other question.
I think we should. I'm not sure what the right number is yet. So I guess I'm sort of feeling like we should take the recommendations forward and say we want to develop this goal, but probably spend a little bit more time on this.
And we've got the high level goals where achieving functional zero homelessness is
Mhm.
listed at number 4. So that way it doesn't fall off of our radar. We're still keeping it at the forefront moving forward as we wait to see about, some other plans and research in place about what is needed in our community. I'm still going to advocate for women and children on this one too.
Great, so we can take that one off and we'll just make sure to speak to it. Okay. All right.
Cool. Yeah, definitely think we should bring it up in the next, when we present this to the product.
Right, that we're going to be goal.
Yeah.
We're just working out.
Yeah.
All right. Are we done with that item?
Yes.
All right.
Got everything I need.
So the next thing is the discussion of the property idea. Is that right? Okay, great. So commissioners, I requested that we spend a few minutes at the meeting today talking about the proposal that was developed in-house by the county back during the Recovery Act process. And so the staff brought forward a proposal for use of ARPA funding in order to begin identifying and acquiring properties that have great potential as affordable housing development sites. So the commission didn't fund that proposal at that time. But as we've gone through this goal setting process, to me, I've been thinking about this idea, and to me, as we've set these goals, I was not honestly super fired up about this idea when it came forward originally, but as we've set these goals, to me, I can see it seems more and more like a really good idea. I can see how acquiring even maybe a fairly small number of really good sites could really meaningfully advance these goals. We are in a part of the state where sites are challenging because of topography and because land is expensive. So there's other parts of the state where there's probably great sites at a really, we would see as a very attractive price all over the marketplace. But that's kind of not where we're at. So I feel like kind of applying some additional attention and resources to try to strategically pick up a few sites could really help our goals. So what I wanted to kind of ask for some discussion around would be not that we commit a certain amount of money for this purpose. I think the original idea was that the staff requested up to $10 million of ARPA funding to kind of go do this. So my idea is a bit more modest than that, in that we wouldn't pre-commit to any funding level, but we would basically say, we like this idea, we endorse this idea. Our committee would, obviously the whole commission would have to confirm this, but like, we would recommend for consideration to the county commission that they approve, what's the number I used? $7 million?
Yeah.
That we approve up to $7 million for this purpose. We would direct our county team, and they're probably going to work with some folks in the real estate community to go kind of, we give them some criteria to go look for sites. Any sites would need to be brought back to us to look at. And we can, it's permissible to go into closed session to look at real estate issues, so you're not telling the whole world what your negotiating strategy is. And so, but they would have up to $7 million that could be considered for this purpose. And if they find great sites and the commission agrees those are great sites and we successfully negotiate some site control on them, then that would be the budget to work on this. But we wouldn't commit to spending that much money, because this is kind of a new idea for us. So if the sites that are coming back, the commission feels like, not sure about this, maybe feel risky, or we're just not comfortable with it, then we would basically say, let's reevaluate all of this in 6 months and kind of see, how's this going? Have we found some good sites? We've secured some good sites. Let's keep it going. Or has this turned out to be maybe something that hasn't been, we're not seeing a lot of productive outcomes from it. In that way, if we decide not to continue it and we haven't allocated all or some of the $6 or $7 million, we still have plenty of time that then the commission could redeploy some or all of those funds to the other priorities that we're going to be exploring over the coming months through the ARPA phase 2 process. So that's kind of what I wanted to suggest. But if we're going to do it, I'd kind of be interested in kind of getting it started now, so that later this year we can kind of start seeing how it's going, rather than waiting until the end of the ARPA approval process to even kind of really start seeing like what can we find out there in the market around this. So that's what I've been thinking, and wanted to spend a little time here to get y'all's thoughts on it and have a discussion about it too.
Yeah, I guess I have a couple thoughts or questions. I guess first of all, yeah, the not committing to an amount sounds great. It seems like we got one awesome property out of this. It would be kind of worth the time. And then I guess the other thing would be, I can't remember if it was in the application or if there were your initial thoughts around, being property that's zoned appropriately on transit lines, water and sewer, all that kind of thing. That makes sense to me. But that kind of leads me to the next question, which is kind of like how narrow do we want the kind of final product to be? Do we want it to just be rental multifamily? Could it be home ownership? Is it, what are we open to in terms of final housing products?
So it's a great question. My initial kind of instincts were around to try to define it fairly narrow. We're not like a development company, right? We're county government. Yeah. So it's not like this is something we just, do all kinds of different development. So in a way, if we're going to do this, I kind of feel like giving like as kind of specific direction as possible for sort of you can build it. We have a lot of different kinds of goals. You can build a lot of different kinds of things, large, medium, small, home ownership, apartments, whatever. I feel like it might be helpful to just have a fairly tight focus on it around these bigger sites for the multifamily projects that will, even if we only do get 1 or 2 or 3, could meaningfully take us to our goals. I think in the marketplace, those are also the hardest types of sites to sort of naturally come about in the market.
Right.
By their nature, they're bigger, more expensive, they're harder for developers to put together. I'm sure nothing's easy, but there's a lot of places you can build, a habitat project. A lot of great neighborhoods, a lot of great land, probably all expensive, but it's not like there's only a few of those sites in the county, whereas some of these bigger sites, like we truly are, like they are finite. So I feel like kind of trying to go out and pick up a few of those would be most valuable. So that was kind of my thoughts on it.
Okay.
What do y'all think?
So when you're talking about that, that reminds me of like Ferry Road. Is that kind of what you're envisioning, like a big site like that with different variety of developments, or?
Well, that's gonna be a great project, by the way. But well, you know, it's kind of one that wasn't acquired, of course, for that purpose.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I would say if we were going on buying land, like we probably wouldn't buy Ferry Road, right? Like there's not transit there. It's just, you know, if we were gonna strategically look at this, like I would want something to be on like a primary corridor with great zoning and transit going by it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love Ferry Road. And I think we can do some cool stuff there, but it's probably not what you would buy if you were going out and doing something with this as the focus.
Yeah.
So my hunch. And in the right place, you know, you can put, you know, a great project on 10 acres. So maybe, you know, in the right location, you can do a lot on much smaller tract of land.
Yeah.
Could be a good opportunity though to hit our missing middle where we may not necessarily need the transit component. So it could broaden what we're looking at a little bit as well. So I think, Parker, that gets back to, in my mind, like all kinds of different types of housing would be on the table at that point.
Yeah.
Did you mean for Ferry Road or for
No,
this property?
for this
search
property
process?
search. Yeah.
And I was thinking more about the terms of the mix of properties in Ferry Road, not necessarily the location.
Yeah. In my mind, it's the
Not
mix.
It's
Yeah.
the mix, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think Brownie's been talking about very specific, very narrow multifamily rental
Yes.
is what you're advocating for, right? And not a Ferry Road style mix.
I mean, that's what I would advocate for. I mean, the other thing I would say is that, I mean, I'm glad we have the goals around the, you know, the so-called workforce or the 80 to 120, you know, space. But I don't know, but there's so many different kinds of projects. Well, in some ways, that's sort of the least defined. Like, I think we probably have the least clarity around exactly how we make that happen, partly because there's so many fewer examples out there. Like, it's not something we've done in the past. You look at what other communities are doing, most of them, many of them don't have goals like this. So in a way, it might be like hard to know, like, well, what type of property would be good for that. Because I feel like that's a whole program that's somewhat undefined at the moment.
Yeah, no one's applied for that from us.
And I don't even think we've asked people to.
Yeah.
I think our criteria in the past, we would not solicit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Parker,
I mean, I think it would be fascinating to find out what the staff would find out in the market to begin with. And I mean, I think it'd be worthwhile to look and see if there's 5 properties that you could do something with, and hopefully multi-family rental. I mean, there's not enough of that, and those parcels are scarce. But yeah, at a minimum, finding out what's out there in the market, I think would be fascinating to find out over the next 4 or 5 months.
and how broad or narrow would you prefer to see it? We did something.
We do, the more I'm thinking about this, you know, we do need to give them direction, because very specific direction, because of the size of the parcels and their locations is what, you know, that's going to dictate all of this. Because you can find 5 acres, you know, not on transit and do duplexes or whatever. But we can tell them what kind of land they're looking for. So yeah, I mean, I think looking for the rental, the larger scale rental, multifamily is probably the way to go. And then we can get some feedback midway through staff to see how it's going.
Yep.
Yeah. To see if we can cast a wider net.
staff's thoughts around these questions.
When you wrote that, I guess when you guys wrote the ARPA original
So-
application, what were you?
Well, yeah, let's start there. So the original thought process would have been for larger scale multifamily sites because they do have fairly specific and defined parameters. And they are sometimes harder to acquire and secure, and they represent a large barrier to all development, but particularly for our traditional partners who have acquired sites, right? Like they're kind of limited in how many sites they can hold at a time and the other aspects of that. The other piece to that particular consideration, and I think this would be something that we probably need more clarity on, is depending on the source of funds. So in this case, ARPA, there's an expectation of expenditure and delivery. And what is the delivery measure? Is it the ownership of a site at the end, or is it units being delivered? And so if you have a very specific and targeted program, and you know you can deliver the affordable units within the span of the expenditure and commitment and delivery of project timeframe. So that was kind of the initial thought process, is that those might be easiest to define, easiest to then identify potential parcels, and then have the ability to deliver them within the time frame of project delivery, which now is what, 4 years we have left. You have to commit them by 24, and you have to complete the projects by 26. So that being said, it takes a couple of years sometimes to get tax credit. So these might not be tax credit projects that you're identifying in order to deliver them in the time frame necessary to have the construction completed. So, I mean, there might be some reasonableness to look at other site types in that you might be able to deliver those more quickly, or to think about them not necessarily as tax credit projects exclusively, only because of the limitations of how many you get an award for and how quickly you can advance them. That would be the only caveat kind of at this time with the project.
So Matt, did you say that the current thinking is that just simply acquiring the property for this purpose and getting that accomplished is not enough? Like you think you have to actually construct the units within that time frame, or do you think that ARPA can be satisfied by saying, we bought this property, it's for affordable housing, definitely going to be what it's used for?
I mean, I
Read the minutes of our meetings, like that's what it's all about, you know?
I think, right, like that would be the caveat, is just getting clarification, and I would want to clarify that with the staff administering that. But I think you would have to purchase it and deed restrict it, or provide some mechanism to ensure that this was for the purpose that we intended, even if you hadn't fully delivered the project.
Okay,
So I think it's kind of a reevaluation, because the initial thought was we could probably do it and have projects delivered and be completed, and that would be the end product. So it's just a reevaluation.
So you would want to confirm that with the staff again, okay. I mean, I think we probably can get some projects completed still, you know, but it would be nice to know that, like, simply securing the site, deed restricting it, so it must be used for that, would also satisfy. So, all right.
Well, I would say in other projects, so if you did want to look at other project types that weren't necessarily large scale, like smaller lot acquisition, where you may not necessarily want to permanently deed restrict it, you know, home ownership. If you're exploring that as a potential thing to fund, you may not want a permanent deed restriction. As part of the idea is wealth building and home equity and that sort of thing in that kind of affordable housing program. So we may need to think about, like, if that's the goal, then those projects may need to actually have units delivered and purchased in the timeframe, because I don't know that a deed restriction would work. So we'd have to look at, in different project types, if it's not just exclusively multifamily, deed restricted affordability, for those types of projects, you might have to have a different expectation of what would be your end result. So that would be something else we could talk about.
So I think that, you know, in the email that I wrote this morning, I don't think I took the position that it can only be for this one thing, right? So I think the way I phrased it was that, like, prioritization would be for these, you know, kind of key larger tax credit projects that obviously take us big steps down the road.
Of our biggest goal.
Of the goal that is really our big stretch goal,
Yeah.
right? So would we be kind of in consensus around the idea of, you know, kind of advancing this, not closing the door like if maybe something just, really, some really cool property is identified, that would be more of like a, like a great place for a home ownership project or something like that. Then we're not closing the door to that. But we're also kind of telling whichever folks on our staff and whoever their kind of like real estate folks, that we are really looking for these as as a specific search process too. Would that be
That feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So we can use the goals that we established to guide us as we move forward in the search. Is that what you're saying then? Rental is the number one, but we also have ownership.
Yeah, and I do think that, one of the things that we are hearing from the development community is that it's like the tax credits are good, but also like the larger ones are really good. And again, we're just starting to look at these, but I think we've got in front of us like the largest tax credit project we've ever had, and the price per unit that's being requested to us is much smaller, which is consistent with what a lot of folks are saying, is that there's this economy of scales for the larger projects. So I would say, that's part of why I think kind of saying, like, you can find sites where you can do 150 to 200 units into that program. That would be particularly interesting for, to look at. But again, not to say that it's to the exclusion of other sites.
I think it'll be important to get clarity too around purchasing and then the deed, or do we actually have to deliver? Several of us received some information this morning about supplies are not going to get here any faster, costs are going to continue to remain, high. So I think we're going to have to keep that in mind too in terms of delivery time. Yeah.
All right. Well, is there a motion? I think we should make a recommendation to the commission regarding this. This is good. We're basically kind of asking them to go ahead and make this decision around some potential use of ARPA funds, as we're entering into this larger ARPA process.
Sure.
Will we be making a motion to recommend an ARPA application be sent, or be a recommendation to approve it, or what?
So how about this? I'll try to make a motion. So I would make a motion that our committee recommends for consideration of the county commission that we give direction to the staff to, in support of the proposal that the staff developed around using ARPA funds to identify secure sites for potential affordable housing development. Basically, we approved that, but with the details being that we're not pre-committing any funds to it, but that we're approving up to $7 million of investments of those funds to identify sites, bring back sites to the committee and the commission that they think look promising, with each project needing to be reviewed and approved on a case-by-case basis. That would be supportive of the proposed affordable housing goals, but with a particular prioritization for the larger tax credit project sites, but open to all of the goals. And let's see if there's anything else. And that we would also do an evaluation of this within 6 months of this being approved by the county commission, to kind of evaluate how it's going, to either then kind of, unless we've spent all the funds by then, to either keep it open for a longer period of time, to keep looking for additional sites, or to potentially redeploy whatever balance of that $7 million hasn't been spent to other commission priorities. Okay, I think that captured what was in here in discussion. So that's the motion I'll make. So further discussion.
I'll second the motion.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any? All right. All right. Well, thanks to the staff for bringing this idea forward. I've gone 180 degrees on it, so keep us. Obviously, we'll talk about this with the commission And did the staff have any, is there any reason we shouldn't go ahead and bring that to the commission, not today, of course, but
Okay.
like maybe at our next meeting? That's the idea?
That's fine. Yeah.
Very good. Well, commissioners, it's 2:39, so that item's done. Matt, other items we need to cover today?
So next steps, we have been having twice a month meetings. Normally we would hold our second meeting, which is a special call meeting on March the 15th. I will not be available on that regular meeting date. The expectation is for the committee to make recommendations of allocations and budget requests associated with the Affordable Housing Services Program by April 30th. So the question I think for the committee is, and staff will continue to work to get you information and documents in advance of this. Do you feel comfortable with meeting just twice in April to finish that discussion, or would you like to try to schedule an additional meeting in March to discuss the project requests?
We're still gonna have one meeting. Oh, this is March. This is the meeting.
This is the March meeting. So we would normally have a special called meeting on March 15th to align with your regular board meeting. But I will not be here, and since I'm the principal one and putting together the staff report, that would be kind of our regular meeting. So we could try to meet again sometime in March. If there's concern, we could meet potentially again sometime before the end of April. We normally do have 3 to 4 meetings to have this discussion. So
We had 4 last year.
there was kind of this introductory meeting, and then we had 3 additional. In this round, what staff would suggest if we meet again in March is probably a discussion of all the projects that aren't multifamily, just to kind of get more detail on the summary. Any questions that we have about those, we can get those responded to. That would be kind of a piece that you could potentially complete in March. The other, I think, the focus of the April meetings would really be a deeper dive on those larger asks and those multifamily projects. So it's just a matter of how many meetings do you anticipate. We could also potentially do a longer meeting at one of your April meetings. Go into more detail. That's the other option. If it's a time issue.
Yeah, or like a workshop or something like that. Start at like 11 at lunch, and go until normal time.
So we could extend it just to make sure that there's adequate time for discussion and also response. I think what we missed here without having that second meeting is kind of a time for questions and then collection of any additional information.
I would be a little bit more inclined to have 3 than longer, because I kind of feel like this is like one of those where you need to get the spreadsheets up, kind of start putting numbers in, realizing that we don't really have money, and then kind of go away and think about it, and then kind of come back. I need to go away and then come back.
Yeah.
So I would rather do 3, but not necessarily plan on having them be longer, but add somewhere in here, like in late March or somewhere in April, a chance for one additional.
We could try Tuesday meetings, and of course this will be bearing on your schedule. The 22nd is a possibility, though I don't know where we'll be on performance. Again, at that meeting, you could really focus on we could bring you additional detail and comparison on the projects that are the multifamily, but I'm not sure where we'll be on pro forma review at that point on those projects. I'll just be transparent about that because it's a lot of detail. We might be further along if we wait until the 29th, but then you'll be meeting kind of back to back if we try to stick to those Tuesdays.
We have budget work sessions that week.
I can't do the 22nd at all. I have a commitment I cannot get out of.
I have the budget work sessions on the calendar.
Oh, yeah, the 29th.
Yeah, so maybe we
Oh, the
could
29th.
go to April 12th.
I mean, that's the
And
other.
have 3 weeks in a row together.
I'm not going to be in town.
How was one?
The 12th.
Oh, actually, I'm gonna be on town.
That's spring break
I
week.
got a spring break in there too.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's right.
Maybe we ought to, like Monday, which one, the 4th? Is that, wait, no. I'm out that whole week of April 11th and 15th as well for spring.
What about April 7th? It's a Thursday, we would meet on the 5th and then come back on the 7th.
It's close.
Or then go to the end of April. We have to have it to budget. End of April,
Do it on the last day.
that last week of April.
So like the 26th,
That works.
Budget work sessions.
on the 26th?
How about that?
Calendar.
Yeah, I have it too.
Okay.
What about Monday, the 25th?
What about the 25th?
That looks good.
And if we get knocked down in 2 meetings, like this may, it
Right,
may
you
not
might
be
not
needed,
have it.
right? But just, I think we should have it there just in case. The 25th will work fine.
Yeah, works for me too.
So we will go ahead then and
Can you not do the
What
25th?
about the 27th?
I am fine that day when.
I'm fine that day after 11.
Okay.
27th. Does that work for the staff?
Just, yep.
Okay.
Just other, you know.
1 o'clock?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Let's make 1 o'clock.
so staff will work to identify, if this space isn't available, a space for us to meet, we can get that reserved and put it on everyone's calendar as a placeholder. There is the potential that you'll complete your discussion. I know this is, you guys are old hat at this now, so you're very familiar with the process, so it may go a whole lot faster than
Yeah.
than it has been. So we paused it and we may not even meet on this, right? So all that remains left is public comment, and I will give the caveat, so we're still using the Engage platform, so citizens through that portal can provide comment. We can also obviously take any public comment that's in person as well. So whatever order you want to do that in, and then we'll assist anyone online who needs
All right.
access.
Is there anybody, let's do the online first. Is there anybody who has commented? Okay, great. Is there anybody here with us today who would like to make any comments? Yes, sir.
3 things, and I'll try to keep it quick. This is Andy Barnett with Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity. To the discussion around how to achieve more 30% AMI rental units, I would request that the committee consider making voucher acceptance a requirement for any projects that receive Affordable Housing Services Program funding. I think that's a great way for you to boost that goal. To the discussion of strategic property acquisition by the county, I would just highly encourage you to keep that as flexible as it possibly can be, that you coordinate closely with affordable housing developers so that we don't wind up competing against one another for the same parcels of land and bid up the price or leave something on the table that we think maybe the other one is looking at. Also recognize that in this market, anything that can be done to make the county process as agile as possible is going to be important to be competitive in this real estate market for site acquisition. Finally, I want to thank the staff for doing a great job of summarizing all of the very complicated requests that came through, but I would like to make just a couple of quick clarifications on the habitat proposals that were presented today. Our homeownership proposal showed a affordability period of 5+ years. Effectively, that's 30 years given our right of first purchase and the way that the deed of trust is structured for the funds that the county has in the program. So not 5+ years, but really 30 years of affordability. Our home repair program does serve owners up to 70% of area median income, but in point of fact, the average AMI that we're serving in that program is below 30% of area median income. So
The average is?
the average is. Yeah. And we have specific targeted AMIs in that in the proposal that you'll see when you get the full packet of what we expect to serve with this. So I know sometimes that, you know, the ceiling becomes the floor in those AMI categories. Finally, I wanted to say that the higher cost per unit that we're reflecting in our homeownership application this time really reflects what we've heard from you and from staff, encouraging us to find ways to increase the rate of productivity that we're able to provide in the county. We've been able to really leverage your investment with private dollars and earn revenue. Those sources are limited, and so if we model building at a faster rate, obviously that leverage gets spread over more units in a given period of time, requiring the deeper level of investment from the county that we're showing here. So just those couple of clarifications.
And real quick, so the 30 years of affordability, how do you ensure that? How's it work? If somebody moves in one of your houses and decides to sell it, what happens again?
So
because they don't have to sell it to another lower income family, right? They can just sell it to wherever the market.
we have the right of first purchase,
Yeah.
and so would exercise the right of first purchase and be able to sell it to another income qualified family, or in the case where we might choose not to do that, we would recapture all of the initial subsidy, both the county's subsidy that's secured with a lien against the property and our initial subsidy that's secured with another lien against the property. So all of that would come back to be used for the same purpose that it was originally used for. So we'll either recapture the property or we'll recapture the subsidy that went into the property.
But when someone wants to sell it, you have a right of first refusal, but at market rate. So
Yes.
They can sell it for whatever the market will bear, and you have the opportunity to buy it at that market
Yes.
price. And if you don't buy it, then they return the public
And private
investment.
investment, yes.
in the project.
That's right.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Did you want to come to this one? Love to hear from you.
Yeah, Margie Bukowski, Weaver Cook Construction. I shared some information with a couple of you today that talked about the cost of construction materials and from lumber to doors to doorknobs, HVAC. And I'm just asking that as you go through your numbers and thinking about future, it doesn't look like these things are going to come down anytime soon. And as we know from past experience, when things go up, they don't necessarily come back down to below the level. So you have to keep that in mind as you go through the numbers of what the $7 million might or might not buy, or what your project people are coming up with, what this should cost or what that should cost. Also, as Andy said, try to be as flexible as you can, because you're going to put yourself in direct competition with real estate developers that are coming from all over. I'm sure you're well aware they're coming from anywhere from Minnesota to Georgia, Kentucky, California, to come here and build. And we only have so much land, so it's hard. And those tax credit projects have to have so many requirements, the QAP, that, as much as I love the ferry site, it doesn't really work for a QAP. So just something to think about.
All right, thanks. All right, anybody else? I think we're gotten through all of our agenda items, so we will adjourn. Thanks, everybody.